Welcome to Elevate, the podcast that inspires you to reach new heights. Each episode brings you motivating conversations and transformative insights that empower you to level up. Whether you're seeking guidance or a burst of inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's elevate your life. Let's elevate your future. Starting now. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host today, Kyle Goodnight, and we've got a very special guest with us today. Lori Lisai is a human design expert and an ex-teacher, so we're going to hear all about how she made that transition. But before we get into the interview, I just want to make sure that you like, share, subscribe. If you listen to this podcast or any of our other podcasts and you know someone that may need the message, go ahead and share that with them. We really want to get our message out there. Elevate is all about lifting people up and elevating them to take them to the next level. And I believe that Lori has a great story today about how she's done that for herself and now how she does that to help other people elevate their lives and elevate their situation. So without further ado, here's my guest, Lori Lisai. And go ahead, Lori, go ahead and tell us a little about yourself and a little bit of a backstory of how you became is it human designer or human designee? I mean, I'm very new to the human design world and we've got some pretty cool stuff. You're going to see some shock and awe on my face because I gave her some information that she can give me a reading. So we'll see how that goes.
So good. So
I'm a
good.
little scared.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. So I call myself a human design mentor and coach. And yeah, I was a teacher for 26 years. You know, by all accounts, I had just a few years left, you know, before retirement. And I just found myself more often than not kind of feeling like I still had these big dreams, you know, and things that I wanted to do with my life. And I wasn't quite sure like how teaching was going to get me there. And so I started asking, you know, some relatively uncomfortable questions when you get to a certain part, right, in your career. And you're like, oh, you know, I feel like I should do this, or I only have a little while left and then I can, you know, collect pension and yada, yada. Yeah. But I just couldn't, like, I got to the point where I couldn't really ignore my intuition anymore. And so a series of events happened at my school. I was very involved in school change work, and this was right around COVID. So lots of changes happening anyway. And we got to the point where we were starting to talk about what happens when we come back. And I saw one path, which was very different than, you know, the 100 years before. And, you know, I think my administration wasn't quite ready to go there. And I sort of took that as my sign to exit. It was like, okay, I think I've done what I can do here. And I'm ready to like move on to something else. So I had started to learn about human design already at that point. And I think that definitely helped to seed this idea that I could do something else and that it was really important actually for me to follow that feeling and that intuition.
Okay. Fantastic. So can you go ahead and describe what human design is?
Yeah, absolutely.
And why it's, so, I would guess it's pretty important to know, you know, having a little bit of dabble of research on human design and to prepare for this. You know, it seems like it's bigger and better than like a personality chart. But so if you could speak on what it is so if anybody's ever, I didn't know this term a week ago.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a combination of systems. It's a little bit science and a little bit ancient wisdom kind of mixed together. So it incorporates Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Kabbalah, genetics, quantum mechanics, and the chakra system. And so none of, you know, when you break it apart, none of the pieces is, new. Like it's really a collection of systems, and it comes together to basically tell you like how your energy works and how you are technically designed to like function in this world to be kind of your best self, your best human self. And the work after kind of learning what your human design tells you about your energy is then in in sort of shedding all of the expectations and the shoulds that we take on through our entire lives. The work is really in shedding those and learning how to follow what is best for you versus trying to accommodate or fit into boxes that other people have created for you, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, it sure does. I've had a background in ever since I was little. I was labeled or learning disabled. So that was the early words for it. If fast forward 20 years, they would have called me ADHD. So it would have just been that. And with sprinkle in, I mix up my numbers and my words. Sometimes I forget words. Sometimes when I read them, like small words. The big thing for me with the learning disability was more this dyslexic stuff. So like I would be working in retail as a early college student, and I'd read out a number to someone for their total for their price, and I'd be like 72.35. I mean 72.53. It was like I would always catch myself for the most part. So it was very low level. I went to college. I graduated from college. I'm a healthcare worker that remembers all kinds of stuff out of my protocol. So it's not like this. It's not a dysfunction. Learning disability seems so harsh, but that's just what they knew to call it back then. But with that being said, where I'm trying to get to is the fact that I've done the flip charts with the ink blots, and I've done the, hey, can you make this shape, and boop, boop, do. So I've done quite a bit of stuff, especially when I was younger. I mean, it was a yearly thing for me to do like almost like that personality or that aptitude test or whatever they called that, So I remember all that. I haven't done one of those for years. I really actually kind of want to go back and try it again. Maybe I'm like awesome at it. Like, oh, look at this, what I can make. And I can make a brooch and I can make a pterodactyl, because I'm super creative. I know that about me. And the ADHD part, I've always labeled myself ADHD because I'm so active. And it's just my ADHD. But maybe it's not an ADHD where it's not, I'm not hyperactive. Somebody would tell me, people that know me would say, hey, I mean, sometimes you're a little much, but it's just me being me. And it doesn't mean I can't calm down, because I can literally tell myself, hey, just chill out and do it. Maybe that's years of practice, but maybe it's human design. And what you're getting ready to do is talk to me about what my chart says, and you can discuss what a human design chart does for people, because you need to know my birthday, where I was born, and the time I was born, and it tells all this stuff from what I've done in research. So I'm super excited to hear about that. But if you could talk about the difference between maybe it's not understanding your human design and instead of being labeled ADHD, because I think you and I in our first introductory talk, you pegged me when I told you about what all the different things I do. You already pegged me, and then you looked me up and you're like, yeah, you were right. I mean, even just a small not even a 5-minute conversation about how busy my life is, you knew exactly what kind of person I was. And then you got my birthday and time and place of birth. And it was like, you just sent me, I remember you sent me that text. It was just like, hey, I nailed it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm interested to see, maybe it's not the ADHD and I can start blaming it on my human design, or not blaming it, but chalking it up to my human design.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you mentioned the labeling that happens. That's one of the issues that I have with our school system. And, I think.
Oh, I know. And you're right in with it. Yep.
Right.
I mean,
right. And just to think about like how, if we could start talking about labels from an empowering standpoint versus, it's some sort of disability, or even like you learn differently, when in fact, everyone learns differently, but most schools are just designed to speak to one type of learner,
Yeah.
So really your ADHD, which may, have been listed as a disability in school, is actually a superpower, in so
Oh,
many ways.
I mean, I call it my superpower because people are like, how do you get so much stuff done? I'm like,
Right.
well, it's called hyperfocus and thank you, ADHD. I
Yes,
don't, it's not
exactly.
the ADHD, and I'm not diagnosed. I'm self-diagnosed because when we did diagnose my son, it was like every single box when
Yeah.
when the doctor who diagnosed him told us about him, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, and I'm like, so,
Yeah.
like I said, but how much of that is ADHD or human design?
Right, right. And that is to say, like, just who you are, not necessarily having, this label that you fit into, because the way your design is expressed is very individual. So one of the things you mentioned was like the difference between a personality test or like one of those aptitude tests and something like human
Hmm.
design. So yes, human design is based on your birth time, your birthplace, your birth date. And the time is very important. I did notice that your time was 9:50, and I'm always a little bit suspect of rounded birth times. So whether they be on a five or, end in a five or a zero,
Yeah.
just because those minutes do really make a difference when it comes to some of the other layers of human design. For kind of the top level stuff, it doesn't tend to make a huge difference. But, there are some charts that I've run when a person doesn't necessarily know their birth time. And so I try 3 different
Mhm.
times. I usually try like 12:01,
One. Yeah.
and then noon and then 11:59, and just
Yeah.
see like how much it changes.
Yeah, and I
And
can only understand that birth time is, who knows, because most people know that by this point in time watching our shows, but this is the first time you've watched us. I'm from the medical field and I've been in live births, plenty of them, along with two of them from, my own children. I was right there with her every step of the way. But I'm a paramedic and I've also delivered someone. And I believe, if I remember right, when we did the live birth, we asked our dispatch for a birth time because the baby came out right before we walked in the house. And we ended up cutting the cord, of course, and stimulating the baby. But what is birth? Is it the cord cut? Is it the full, you know, is it the full delivery where the feet and toes are completely out?
mhm,
What is it? Or is it when they stimulate the baby and they start crying, but that's 2 minutes later because we're doing life-saving events on that child. So
mm.
that is a question I have. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but having that medical background and knowing exactly how births go, and I've seen plenty. Been in the ER. I've seen emergent ones. I've been in ones where we've had C-sections. With a C-section. It's like what is the definition of birth, and when it comes to human design? I'm sorry I kind of cut you off with that other question, but it brought up another one. What you're saying about time of birth.
Yeah. And no, not at all. I think it's a great question. And I think there's definitely some room for interpretation. In my mind, it's that first breath, but, you could definitely define it as the toes are out because maybe, the baby's already breathing, or who knows. And sometimes, like, even when you're in the space, it's like you don't necessarily look up at the clock or look at a watch, or, like the people. So there's definitely some interpretation. It's not always like a perfect thing. You can
Yeah.
do something called a birth chart rectification, which is a process where there are people trained. They usually have a very strong astrology background, and they will interview you. They'll go through this process of interviewing and look at, what they know about your chart. And then they can narrow it down for you to an exact birth time. You can also, if are a little more open to the woo, I guess you could say, you can use a pendulum, which is something that I've done to help people narrow down their birth time. And oftentimes those are quite accurate as well. So
Interesting. Okay.
because, if you subscribe to the science of energy, and believing that everything is energy, then the idea behind human design is that when you're born, like there's this constant movement of the tiniest bits of matter, which are called neutrinos. And neutrinos carry mass, like they're the tiniest bits, but they carry mass, which means that they also carry information. And basically they're passing through everything like solids, all the time. And they're carrying this information. And so when you are born, essentially it's what is imprinted, what comes with you, what is the design of you. And so for your human design, you have that time of birth, which gives you this personality side, we call it, or the conscious side. And then roughly 3 months before, you have the design side, or your unconscious, which is the things that we tend to be a little less aware of consciously, but other people can often see them in us. So there are these kind of two pieces that make up the whole. And as I mentioned earlier, like it's very multi-layered and multifaceted, human design is. Oftentimes people start with type, strategy, authority, and maybe your profile. And when I was listening to you and you were telling me about all of these things that you love to do, you've got your podcast, you work in the medical field, you do voiceover acting. I was like, okay, hello, manifesting generator. That is, yes, absolutely. The beautiful thing is you're very much following that type design, which is multifaceted, multi-passionate, juggler, always has, multiple balls in the air. And the key to kind of living in alignment as that type is making sure that whatever those balls are that you're juggling consistently light you up. They consistently like bring you satisfaction. So when they no longer serve that, then it's important to just let them fall and pick up the next one, And I think some of the conditioning that can happen for manifesting generators is this like idea of quitting things, and I don't want to be a quitter, so I'm going to keep doing this thing, even though, I used to be really good at it, but I don't necessarily really love it anymore, but I'm going to keep doing it because I'm maybe good at it, or people think I'm good at it, or they expect me to keep doing it. And that's where they end up kind of pulling off their path, So you're just such a great example of a manifesting generator because you've got, so many things going on, and clearly you are good at them. Hopefully they all still light you up.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I got this morning excited about our interview, so that was huge. I'm on a little bit of a break with the EMS right now for a couple of weeks, just by design for some, my wife went to Disney and I needed to be home for the dogs. And so it was like perfect. It was like perfect time to really focus in on really getting this podcast up and running and getting other podcasts that I do production for, planned and things organized. And now we're like 6 shows ahead, and I'm like 2 shows ahead now once I have you. So once I have you on it. So, the thing is you said something there a second ago. And of course I want to get somewhat of a full reading would be nice, but a little bit more about me to see what else. But one thing you mentioned there, that you said that I am aligned when I'm a busybody, if you will. And, I think the manifesting generator is someone who does a lot of things, right? And is that the definition of them? So the one time that I split off from being able to have the freedom to do so many things, which my EMS world allows me to have the freedom, because I only work every 3rd day. So I'm 24 hours and I'm in a building and I'm waiting for the tones to drop, is what we call them, or the emergency to happen. And if the emergency doesn't happen, I can, talk with my partners. I can work on small projects. I can do education. I can build my education side of things because I'm also an educator for EMS. And so I can do all these different things while I'm there until the tones go off. Then it's focus on my patient, right? But the one time I left EMS, and even my hospital time, let me back up for a second. Even my hospital time as a respiratory therapist, we're like all over the place in the hospital. Nurses typically just work in an ER with 4 patients or whatever, in a floor with 4 or 5 patients, in, mother and delivery, crazy, but yeah, it's still some patients, right? Respiratory therapy goes everywhere in the hospital. We are always doing something new, always. Yes, we have our patients, but when we're in the ER, it's always new. And that fed me. I come home from work just juiced, right? And on a busy EMS day, I come home from work juiced, but usually I get to try to calm down because I'm allowed to sleep at my job because I'm there for 24 hours. But the one time that I got recruited to use 100% of my resume, because also it's in medical sales, I worked for a company who developed EMS products. I'm like, okay, this still aligns with my mission. My mission is to help people. I'm just helping them in a different way. I'm helping them really early. Like, I'm bringing products into the country and into the marketplace and promoting them and teaching my sales reps how to sell them, because I have the medical and clinical background to educate them on how to use it. I've already done the due diligence to bring it to market. My team has already figured out that this is something that we want to represent. But I was miserable because I was doing I'd leave at 7 a.m, get home at 7 p.m. I'd kiss the kids goodnight, maybe eat a little dinner, and then open up my computer again and start working on the next thing or organizing stuff. Like, I was working all the time. And it was always yes, it was multiple projects. There was a lot of that. So that helped me. But then it was just like, then it just started getting like, I know what anxiety is now. I know what chest pain is now. I know what it means when someone's like, man, I just feel like the walls are coming in on me. Because I sat down that Monday morning in that cubicle and I was like, I reached up and I touched the walls and I was like, who's pushing? And I was there. I was early. And no one else was there. I was like, who's pushing the walls? And no one was pushing the walls. And I looked at myself and I was like, saw the reflection in my computer because I was just starting to boot it up. And I was like, okay, you need to go to the hospital. You need to do something. You need to get the hell out of here. And I did. And then that day was when I put my 2 weeks in and started thinking getting back into EMS. And now I'm back in EMS. But then that opened up the handyman business. That opened up the time to do voiceover because I'm off for 2 days. I'm off for 2 days before I go back to the medic. So what you said when that just made so much sense. And, it's, learning about human design already in just this small amount, is it something that we all should learn so we can know more about ourselves? Because it makes so much sense, just a little bit you've given me.
Yeah. I mean, that's my mission. I would love for everybody to know their human design because I feel like I like to call it the cosmic permission slip. It's like, the example you just gave is so perfect because what I heard you talking about was essentially following what your body was telling you. This is not right for me, right?
The energy.
Exactly.
And I know as a medical professional, we have energy. That's how our heart beats. That's the energy.
Yes.
It's electrical. We can measure it. It's called an EKG.
Yes.
That's energy. Like, if people's like, well, there's no such thing as energy. I'm like, you have a beating heart. Yes.
Yes.
You have a beating heart, so you have energy. It's proof. You're literally breathing and talking to me. It's proof that you have energy.
Right. Oh my gosh. Hallelujah. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at a human design body, it's called a body graph. It looks like a circuit board and it's, intentional because you have channels of where the energy flows. And so something you said when you were describing like the moving from piece to piece as a respiratory therapist and then your schedule with every 2 days you've got off to kind of play and experiment with other things. You used the word fed me, and where you felt like nourished by the work that you were doing and the excitement, and you said I was juiced when I was finished. And that is exactly how you should feel as a manifesting generator or a generator type. Like, any sacral being should feel that way by the work that they're doing. And when they don't, that is like, I mean, you couldn't have more of a scream from the universe that something is out of alignment when that's not happening. If you are not feeling so excited and at the end satisfied, like where does that satisfaction really sit with you? If you're not feeling that way, then it's time to pivot. And human
Pivot. Oh,
design.
the French reference.
Yeah, well, and
Pivot.
totally pivot. That's like, that is for manifesting generators, especially if there's a meme, that is it. It's
That is
the
it. Yeah, I may
Ross
put
and
that
the
in
couch
post.
and the pivot, 100%. Because you have to just have that freedom and willingness to let yourself let go of things that aren't feeling right for you, to pursue the ones that are, and just the way that you are living your life and kind of following this guidance from your body is such a beautiful way of expressing your design. Like, human design is very much about tuning into the body and following its cues. What is it telling me? And so the anxiety, it's
Right.
just your body like communicating with you. This is like,
Right.
you got to make a change.
Well, and to go back to that scenario, that situation for me, when it first happened, of course, there was some doubt in my head because it was a lucrative position, and it could have been even more lucrative as I got further and further into it. And I saw myself being able to work myself up in that company in different positions. But it's one of those things where, it makes so much sense now. And I felt, there was a while there I was like, oh, I failed that. I failed that. There was some doubt. And like right after I quit that and went back to EMS, which was a third of the money, right? I didn't have the sales job anymore because I left the sales job and EMS, because I did sales and EMS at the same exact time, because my 2 days off gave me a chance to go do sales, which fed my chakra, right? I guess that's what you're saying. I was always traveling the state of Ohio and going into new departments and meeting new people, and sometimes travel, which I love travel. But, it was one of those things where I wasn't a failure at that. I wasn't listening to my well, I was when I finally quit, but I don't have to look at it as I failed that time in my life. And if anything, my failures are my success in general, because it taught me that I'm not really made for that type of environment. It doesn't mean that I can't still go and develop products or invent something, because then that's really, adding into my creativity. But it doesn't mean that I'm not, sorry, I don't want this to be about me. I know we really need to be talking about you, but it's like, you bring up so many aha moments of my past already in just this small little beginning of the reading.
Yeah, it's so great. And the idea of that failure piece and that quitting piece, I think, is like a significant obstacle for manifesting generators in particular, because they are the type that, they're here to do many, many things. And they're here to like to find shortcuts, to like find ways of being more efficient and better at systems and things. And then they, sometimes that drive to do that, it's like, I've already mastered that. I know how to do that. So, I'm just going to let it go. It's no longer a fit for me. Or, if there's something else where it just feels more of a drain for you than feeding you, then that's when you really have to listen. And yeah, I mean, it gets sticky when there's a paycheck, like
Right.
attached to that
Right.
decision, or, some other layer of expectation, or, feeling like you need to show up in that way. And I think that's where the choice becomes not quite, so easy to follow through. So at that point, I coach people to think about like, how can you build a bridge, from where you need to be and you really want to be, and how can you like take steps to get there every day? So at least when you're in it and it's not aligned, how do you like work within each day to still find some satisfaction,
Right. So real quick, if there's anything, I mean, is there another portion of what you saw in the charts on me that you can share that may make me freak out and go to a whole nother different conversation?
Yes.
And then I've got, we're, and then I've got a few questions at the end. I think it's something where I think our listeners may be so interested in this that we need to have you back on again sometime, to like dive deeper or what have you. But once again, everybody, we're talking with Lori Lisai, sorry.
You got it.
That A is really messing with me. That's the dyslexic part. That's the Lori Lisai, right? So we're talking with Lori Lisai about human design. She's left the teaching world to become a human designer, a human design expert, whatever. Yeah. So real quick, just, if you have a couple more things to say about what you read within me, and then we'll get to these other questions at the end, and then we'll be wrapped up and have you on again some other time.
I do. And yeah, like I said, there's so many
Oh,
layers.
that didn't like that. She's like, I do.
I
Like
do. I
that
do
was the
indeed.
teacher in you. I saw my like fifth grade teacher. No, I'm just kidding.
So what I wanted to talk about during our intro talk, we were discussing some projection, right? And like other people projecting things onto you that you didn't necessarily like expect or were kind of surprised by, or you might have been like, where did that come from? And I mentioned earlier that there are a few levels of human design where most people start, like your type, strategy, authority, and then profile can be one as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your profile. Profile is a set of numbers at the beginning of your design. So you are a profile 2-5. And what's important to know about that is that you have this projection field. And as a 2-5, it's literally like you have two layers of projections that are going to be coming onto you on a pretty regular basis. And what do I mean by projection? Well, projection is when somebody looks at you and they see something in you that's really more about them and where they're coming from. So they are taking an expectation that they have for themselves or about themselves or whatever, and they are like putting it on you and making it seem like you are the one giving them that impression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it actually does.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they, if you have a conversation with them, they would say like, oh, well, you're a very outgoing, likable kind of guy. And, they might say like something you said led me to believe XYZ. When in where you're coming from, maybe you consider yourself, not. So maybe you had like a talkable moment, or you were feeling lit up and you had, this blah, blah, blah. And then
like a future wish or something, like, because a lot of times I'll do that. I'll basically talk about possibilities. And a lot of people are like, well, you said that. I'm like, well, no, it was a possibility. It was a future thought. It wasn't in stone yet. It was like a dream, if you will, or a goal,
Okay, that's a great example. So if you were to share something like that, and then they take it, right, as if it's already happening, like you've taken steps, it's moving forward or whatever, and then they are automatically jumping to the conclusion and, looking ahead to, okay, well, how is this going to affect me or whatever. So back to the idea of this projection field and the fact that it's a 2-5. So if you even just have one of those lines, if you have a 2 in your profile or a 5 in your profile, then you've got some projection energy. If you have both, then you sort of have double. So it's just important to know that as this profile, because first of all, I think it helps you understand when people misunderstand you or misunderstand where you're coming from. And you can just say to yourself like, oh, there's the projection field at work. I just need to clarify. And then you can step back and say, I'm sorry, I think you misunderstood. This is actually where I was coming from. So, just trying to be super clear. And then the other, like kind of the flip side of it is not getting caught up in other people's projections of you and making them mean something about you. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
kind of not buying into it. It's sort of this layer of conditioning and expectations that aren't anything about you. So just consistently reminding yourself that, okay, this is just part of how my energy works. I kind of invite this in, and how to like create sort of this energetic, shield away from it so that you don't kind of let that energy in and affect who you really are.
Yeah. That's really cool. That, every time as you speak, it's like, being, as I labeled the ADHDer, I like, I'm already thinking of other stuff, and it's really hard to be a good listener when I am me, and is that a trait of my chart? Like, because someone's words can send me into another thought process, you know what I mean? And like I said, I don't know if that's the ADHD or if that's human design, and it may be a little bit of both. But the thing that I'm thinking here when you're saying that, and I was listening because I heard it all, but it was because my brain does several things at once, of course. But like, it sounds like human design can like impact your decisions once you know about it, and like decision making. And like you just said, where it set me into thinking about this is when you said, you can tell yourself, okay, this is just that thing happening, and this is part of my human design, and that's why I feel this way. I can unpack it better, right? Whether that be relationship, whether that's friendship, whether that's business relationship, we're all about, the Elevate podcast and the elevators, as I call the original group, and the people that are in our group, and we'll invite you into the group, because I think having people that have, that desire to help other people are exactly what the Elevate group needs, right? But it's like, we want to elevate ourselves so we can elevate others, or we can get out of some sort of thing that we're dealing with, right? That's what this podcast is all about. So, but yeah, it's been great talking with you. I've got a couple of quick hitters here that we call the elevator pitch at the end of every show.
Love
There's
it.
so much more we can talk about, and I know that. And I like to keep them short and sweet, and listenable while people commute to their jobs. I think the average, now that everybody's going back to work, or just that 30 to 40 minute time frame is really ideal. So, real quick, the elevator pitch is a segment that they Elevate in the Elevate podcast, where the elevator pitch, as you know, is a quick hitters, usually 3 to 5 questions that are just real quick, quick answers, or nothing that goes into long explanation. But just like an elevator pitch is if you get on the elevator and you got to tell the CEO about some new thing that you got, right? So for you, because you were a teacher, and now you're doing this, and you already kind of spoke on it, and it was the COVID thing. And maybe it's just, I don't know if you pinpointed the thing, but the question is the aha moment that shifted your path. Like the moment you were like the moment, like mine was when the walls came in, when I knew I had to get out of that job. That was my aha moment, that I need to get back to what I love, right?
Yeah. It's when we were planning for the following year schedule, and my principal decided to go back to the schedule that we had run pre-COVID instead of trying a new way.
Gotcha.
I knew in that moment
that your stomach dropped. It is. It flips, and you're like, this is not right. There's something very, very wrong with me.
Exactly.
To quote a movie, if someone could leave a message of what movie that was, you'll get bonus points. So I won't tell you what it is, but I think the line was, "There's something very, very wrong with us." I think that was what it was, not me, but I think it was us. But yeah. All right, next question. So a strategy or a habit that you do to this day that helps elevate yourself?
Meditation, for sure.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm starting to dabble into it. It's hard for me to focus for long enough to meditate.
So I would suggest checking out Insight Timer. It's a free app, and they have guided meditations on there. It's a great way to start building a meditation process, like 5-minute guided meditation, so you have something to listen to. And
yeah, I do listen to sleep music often, and maybe I can tell myself that's a way of starting off with meditation and then expanding from that. I've also dabbled in a little bit of yoga, not a lot, but I know that there's a lot of yoga and meditation are, they overlap. So maybe I just bite the bullet and start doing yoga, and that'll get me out of my headspace.
Both of those would be good for you. By design.
Yeah, I know. And everybody, so many people have told me that, and I'm so busy with other stuff, I don't have time to do yoga. I need to make time, right? Let's just go with this last one here, and then we'll sign off, and people will share information about how people can get a hold of you and whatnot. So a skill that you're mastering now that helps you level up, that you'd want our listeners to know. or a skill that you're mastering that you're using to level up others or yourself, or both?
I would say figuring out the best ways to reach people is a new skill that I'm learning. Like, all of the different ways to talk with people and translate human design. I think that is a skill that I'm working on. How do I take like a very complicated system and make it practical and usable for anybody? And then what is the best way to communicate that? Is it through writing social media posts, or, talking to people on podcasts, or, making video,
Gotcha.
et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. All right. Sounds great. Well, Lori Lisai, thank you so much for being on the E11evate podcast. Go ahead real quick and tell people how you can get a hold of you. Of course, I'll put all that information below in the show notes, of course, but your website, your social medias, any of that stuff, your email, whatever you're willing to share so people can get a hold of you if they're more interested to know about their own chart and their own human design growth.
For sure. For sure.
There's a lot more I need to learn.
So you can go to my website, which is lorilisai.com, and you can input your birth information and download your chart for free. And that will give you some basic information to get started with. And once you put your email in, I'll send you a number of short emails that kind of introduce you to the idea and how can you use it in your life, so you can start experimenting with this. So that's at lorilisai.com. I'm also on Instagram at Lori Lisai. I'm on Facebook at Lori Lisai. I'm on LinkedIn at Lori Lisai. And then I have a group program launching soon called Own Your Magic, which basically is designed to help you learn about your human design as well as literally own your magic. I'm so passionate about people feeling like they can shed all of those expectations of other people and just like really step into who they came here to be. So that will be launching soon as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the E11evate podcast. It has been a joy to get to know you. It's, our first conversation, and I bet you that if I were to ask this last question about my human design, is I am quick to friend people. I feel very close to people very fast. And I've done that my whole life. Sometimes it's bitten me in the ass because I just don't see, thank God I'm married who I'm married to, because she's pegged every bad friend in my life, every single one. Even ones that I've been friends with for years. She's like, there's just something wrong with that guy. I'm not one to say that I have one very best friend. Well, maybe one. Baldwin's really close. Like, he's my longest friend. So that's my go-to guy if I need anything. But yeah, I have a lot of really good friends, and I friend people very fast, and I feel very comfortable around people very fast. But I've always chalked that up to my personality because I'm an extrovert, right? So, but it probably boils back to human design. I appreciate you coming on. It's been wonderful. You've been great to talk to. I could talk to you for hours. I feel. I can just put you over in the corner while I'm doing work and just talk to you.
And this,
so
and does
easy.
this.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate you coming on. And once again, everybody, don't forget to like, share. Go to Lori Lisai's webpage and go ahead and send your information to her. It's a free reading or a free introductory reading for you. That's at her website, which will be in the show notes, maybe even at the bottom of the page I'll put in post. But thanks again for tuning in. Remember that E11evate is all about how we elevate ourselves, talking to people that have done such a thing and elevate themselves so they can elevate others. And just make sure that you go ahead and share, like, subscribe. If you hear this podcast and you have a friend of yours or somebody you know that may need to hear this message, go ahead and share that with them. We want to make sure we get this message to as many people as possible. Lori's story about elevating herself during the back end of COVID is such a beautiful situation of taking that big gulp and doing something for yourself that elevated you to a position where you're at now, which I think is awesome. Once again, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Lori, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Kyle.
We'll talk to everybody soon.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks.